Welcome to EVONA Origin Stories, the space podcast where we look to bring you extraordinary leaders from within the sector and their fascinating stories of early life, career, and how they broke into the space industry.
Our guest today has 25 years experience in the space sector, both from a large corporate level and commercial space across satellite communications and launch. She first started a career back in 1995, where she worked at companies like Intelsat, Arianespace, and SpaceX. She's a passionate advocate for women in space and STEM, a compassionate leader that talks about her team with great pride. Her energy is very, very inspirational and infectious. She is now the Chief Commercial Officer of one of Europe's biggest commercial space companies, Isar Aerospace. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Stella Guillen.
Hi, Richard.
Hi, Stella. How are you? Good afternoon.
Good. How are you doing?
I'm not too bad, thank you. I guess if you could kind of kick us off and tell our listeners about the early days of Stella, talk us through where you sort of started in life, grew up, school, college, that sort of thing, and eventually how you sort of found your way into your early career at Intelsat.
Sure. So I was born in Peru in South America. My mom is Brazilian. My dad is Peruvian. So I grew up in a household of two different cultures, let's say, traveling to Brazil quite often. So it was the house was full of, very, very Brazilian and Latin customs, let's say, traditions. So I went to high school there in Peru, and then I decided Peru was actually going through a really tough times economically and also socially in the 80s, late 80s. So I was kind of forced to leave the country and come to the States. I was lucky enough that I had an uncle that lived in New Orleans at the time, and he welcomed his home to me, and I started. I went to school there. I went to Loyola University in New Orleans, study business. I was also a ballet dancer, so I didn't want to leave that. I minor in dance, so business slash dancer. And I traveled quite a lot for dance. That's how I made some money while I went to college. Did perform several, classical ballets in New Orleans and other cities. And graduated, spent a year in Tbilisi in the Republic of Georgia, the middle of the war, which was a very interesting perspective, and came back and to the US. And then actually I went back to Brazil. My parents had moved to Brazil, and I went back there, stayed there for a little while, and came back to the US. I was a flight attendant at the time with American Airlines, and decided to come to the States and continue my education and to get a master's degree, but it was very difficult at the time. And by pure coincidence, I met this lady at the airport who offered me a job right away as a consultant for not consultant, but it was kind of like a consulting thing for recruiting company called Unique International. It doesn't exist anymore, but at the time it was a company that focused on international students in international organizations like the World Bank, IMF, and things like this. And one of their customers was Intelsat, because at the time Intelsat was also an international organization. So I went to meet with the HR department at Intelsat, and when I walked into the building, I saw the satellites mock-ups hanging out from the ceiling, and I became fascinated by the idea of space right away. And I basically placed myself in one of the jobs that they had opening there. And I fell in love with the industry, with Intelsat at the time. And it was just wonderful. So I started my career in space there. as a sales coordinator for the European and Asia Pacific group. And from that point on, they paid for my master's, they helped me, they trained me, they gave me a lot of, tools to be able to continue on the space, on the satellite side of things. And that's how I started my career in the sector. Crazy, huh?
Yeah, that's amazing chain of events, isn't it? By serendipity that you met somebody at the airport and then consulted internationally. Intelsat was one of the customers. You saw the satellite, and then that's amazing.
Yeah, Intelsat, it's very close to my heart because I not only had an amazing experience at the time, but some of my mentors were there, that people that I'm still in touch with, and that I still consult, once in a while on decisions, and good friends that I made for life. So I'm very, very, very fond of Intelsat.
Amazing. And I guess now that since you've kind of entered into the space sector back when you were working at Intelsat, now that you've been in the industry for so long, what is it that I guess you've seen it evolve? A lot of the guests that we've had on this show recently have kind of only entered into the space sector maybe in the last 3 years, 5 years, or whatever. So you've kind of been in there for years. You've seen how it's evolved. Now that you're in the space sector, you've been here for so long. What is it you love most about the space sector?
Well, I tell you, my love for space has changed throughout the years. So when I first started, it was just, everything was so new to me, and it was fascinating to have this, the world suddenly was really small in my hands. I had access to every nationality in terms of people I met and the programs that we work on. So the world seemed really small, and I loved that idea of no boundaries. Let's say working for an international organization was amazing. And after that, actually, I kind of started liking more the technology piece of the space industry, and now it's more about making actually a difference, because it is very tangible. When you work in the space industry, you can see what is it that you provide to the world. If it is a new technologies being demonstrated, or communication, or any kind of science, observing the planet, forecasting weather, whatever it is, you see it, you feel it, you can immediately understand that you're making a difference. So that's the passion I have today for the space community in general.
Amazing, thank you. And I guess within not just the space sector, but one of the big sort of motivations for us, and the kind of the ethos and the mission, the message, but beyond this podcast, is to make space accessible for everyone. So regardless of their educational background or beliefs or industry focus, whatever it is, that there is an opportunity for everybody in space. And one of the kind of the hot topics across not just space at the moment, but STEM in general, is diversity. And unfortunately, the stats are still not where they would need to be in terms of where we need to be in terms of that diversity split. As a female leader within the space sector, and being in the sector for so long, what are your views? What are your thoughts on diversity in space, and what do you feel we should be doing sort of differently across not just the space industry, but maybe also at a STEM level as well, to try and impact change now for future generations?
Yeah, well, I tell you, we're not doing enough, that's for sure. I think we have progressed a lot from 20 years ago, 25 years ago. It has changed, it has, improved, but we are still not doing enough. We actually, women earn college degrees at a higher rates than men in general, but we only account for, let's say, 20% of the international space industry, 13% of the world's engineers, and 5% of commercial pilots are women. So there's definitely a lot more that we can do on that side. And so I think in terms of leadership, we need to push, we need to understand sort of the value that women bring to a company. I think it was, where did I read this? I read somewhere that out of the Fortune 500 companies that had at least 3 women in leading positions, they saw about 66% increase in ROI, and that was due to the purchasing power of women and the decision of women in these companies, which is amazing, right? I mean, if we can somehow relate the importance of women in leadership positions right now in the space industry, we only in aerospace and defense, we only count for about 19% of CEO representation, right? It's very low. So I think understanding the value of women, the fact that women think differently in some areas, it's very important. We need also more role models. I think also flexibility. COVID has showed us that there is now ways to continue the work environment, and giving sort of power to women that want to stay home but they can also work, because we all have experienced it with COVID. Now I think there's an understanding that something could be done there, and that is possible. So I think that's actually very good. It has allowed women that would normally have to question themselves about going to work and going to an office or staying home. They don't question it anymore because it's accepted that women can stay in the at home and do a perfectly fine job. I think encouraging development of science education programs around the world, obviously, that would be great. Also revising hiring process, expanding benefits. I think that's something we can all do. But I think celebrate diversity. Diversity is a huge thing. I mean, I think it's just more the cultural side of companies, right? But honestly, I think the biggest hurdle is to change the mentality across the industry. And that goes to anyone.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Definitely we need to do more.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, it's definitely having the open mind. I think the flexibility, it works for us massively. I think even before COVID, I mean, me talking personally, the one positive for me that came out of COVID is the fact that it actually showed me that I could work more flexibly. I had a bit of like an old school mindset where it's like I wanted to be in the office 5 days a week with people. And actually since then, I find I'm actually way more productive and I have a balance. I'm not always working from home or always in the office, but having that balance helps increase productivity massively. But since we started the company 4 years ago, we've always done it from day one, and it's helped us. It's really, really helped us. But I mean, the stats, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think the easiest way, unfortunately, to kind of get that message through to people is just to show them the statistics that diverse workforces do have an increase in productivity by at least 35%, and the diverse workforce as well that have a diverse and inclusive culture experience have 30% increased revenue and profit margin. So the statistics are there. Like you say, the hardest thing is actually showing people that, but also trying to change the mindset as well, for sure.
Yeah, and also, I mean, for any woman entering the space industry or any industry for that matter, is to convince themselves that they can do. They can get any job a man can or do. That's sort of like personal, internal, right? But you have to be convinced that you can do as good or better job than anyone else, and that's for everybody. But that has obviously needs to continue to progress. I think the new generations, I see it in my kids. I have 2 daughters, and they are more secure about themselves and what they can do than I ever was at that age,
Yeah, no, absolutely. I've got 2 daughters myself as well. One's 4, one's 7, and the 7-year-old has all the confidence in the world. So I think she's definitely going to be fine.
Good.
The next thing I was going to say about the next thing I wanted to talk about is failures and achievements. Failure is maybe not the right word. I think it's more lessons learned. But in terms of lessons learned and achievements, I think with just touching on that younger generation still and keeping with that theme, there's so many different social media outlets and platforms these days, Instagram and Facebook, whatever it is, that I think people always see the kind of like the highlight reel of successes and the achievements and like the end goal or the byproduct of that sort of hard work, that grind, that sacrifice that goes in behind that and leading up to that. So like what would you consider, I guess, going through your journey, your path, whether it's career or life, whatever it is, what would you consider so far your biggest learn to date? So your biggest failure, what you learned from that, and on the other side of that fence, what would you consider so far your biggest achievement to date?
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't necessarily have like a moment or an event that I would consider a failure. But what I can tell you is, I mean, just going back in those, that conference the other day is actually, I feel like I fail every time I don't speak up. I see something wrong and I don't say it, right? I don't come up and say it. I think that's the biggest failure throughout my career, to sort of get overwhelmed with your own fears and insecurities that you can't say things. So I think that's a huge one. Also, seeing the potential for, let's say, improvements in your life, in your career, but not feeling like you should take the risk because there's, again, that insecurity that you won't be able to do certain things, right? So I think it's not necessarily a failure of an event or something like that, but it's more of a character, be guided by your own fears. It's kind of a failure to me. And on the other side, the achievements, I feel like, every time I sit at a table where, I'm well respected and my contribution to what's been discussed is considered, I feel a huge achievement, a huge success already. Being able to go out in the market and open new markets, finding new customers, making a difference on the bottom line of a business. That's a huge achievement in my view. And now to see it actually my team doing the same as through my mentoring them, it's another, it's like a fantastic way of seeing, okay, I'm doing something good. This is what I call success. If someone, you teach someone and they're doing things and making a big difference, I call it a huge success.
Amazing.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, thanks for going through that. I think we definitely need to normalize it. I think we need to normalize failure and the fact that, you will throughout your career and life make mistakes and learn from it and move on. So now I think that's imperative. And it'd be good if it's okay. Would you be able to sort of tell our listeners a bit about what Isar Aerospace do, how they fit into the space sector, and also where do you see Isar being in the next 5 years?
Sure. I am actually super excited about this company. I love everything about it. Honestly, we are a launch service provider. So we designed, built, and launch a Spectrum, which is our launch vehicle, capable of launching up to about 1,000 kilograms to LEO. Perfect for the small and medium satellite missions in constellations. We are scheduled to launch for the first time next year. We're right on schedule. We have built everything from scratch, which is fantastic and amazing. Every time I see the team, I'm just like overwhelmed of pride to be part of this team. They're building the Spectrum, not only the vehicle itself from scratch, but also building the test sites and the launch pads as well. We're launching from Andoya, from Norway. on the first launches, and then also we're looking at launching from French Guiana as well for some of the equatorial and low inclination orbits. So I see this company in the next 5 years being able to launch, on a monthly basis, if not on a weekly basis, and making the satellite industry or the space industry more touchable for everyone, having access to space, becoming more of a commodity. So I see Isar as a great tool for everyone to have affordable access to space. I'm very, very excited about the company.
I've got to say, you guys have got it absolutely dialed in terms of branding, marketing. Your mission is cool, and also the culture and your process as well. I think when obviously we work with you guys, and when we've had people that have kind of gone there and interviewed, like, everybody comments and feeds back to us on the culture and what the people are like there. So I think, how you guys have gone about creating that, everybody seems, on a joint mission, which sometimes sounds like a given, but actually it's not, it's not common. It's hard to come by, and everybody works in harmony, and the culture is really good. And also the process is really slick as well. I think candidates, when they speak to the guys and the interview, the hiring process and everything is so slick. And I think that first interpretation the candidates get from the client is really, really key. So I've got to say, from the outside looking in terms of commercial space in like the US and Europe, you guys have really, really got it dialed.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad to hear that. I mean, we are growing. So obviously every time you grow the company, you go through some growing pains, but I have to say attitude matters when you're going through some growing pains. When I first joined about a year and some months ago, we were, about 70 people or something like that. Now we are 200 and close to 280 people in the company. So it's great to see, the culture staying untouched, and the attitude of everyone to, wanting to grow and wanting to continue with the focus, on what we're trying to do and everything else. So I'm very, very excited. The team is just fantastic. I can't say enough.
Amazing. That's great to hear. And the next kind of, I guess the next two sort of bits I want to cover are kind of linked. The first one is about advice. And again, this can be personal advice or career advice. And I think, again, and this kind of stems from the whole social media segment around that. Sometimes there can be a lot of misinformation out there, a lot of conventional wisdom. Throughout your life and career, what would you say along your journey along career is the best and the worst advice that you've been given over the years?
This is great. I can think of a lot of things actually, but one that stands up, and I have to say even recently, is stop and take a breath, and we're not just talking about yoga exercises, but actually like really breathing, like taking a time to de-stress, to place yourself in a different, let's say, environment for a second, so that you can see things a bit differently. Sometimes we engage so much into what we're doing that it's really hard to step out and see it in different ways. That definitely, I have used that several times through my career, and even on a daily basis, it's sometimes to just take a moment and sort of relax about the situation you're working with, or whatever it is, and stay calm and sort of look at things differently. The other one, which also stands up, and that has been very, very useful for me in the beginning of my career, especially, is to never get complacent with yourself, right? Always try to sort of improve not only a skill set, but also sort of your mental growth, your personality growth, your, in yourself in different perspectives. So not just on the technical side, let's say, or on the skill set, but also on the personal side. So feeling comfortable with yourself, it's not necessarily great at all times. So stepping out of that comfort zone, it's actually, I think, a very, very good advice. Worst advice, it's a hard one because I don't know what has been my worst advice. I think maybe people that have said to me, fake it until you make it. I don't know why I don't like that. But I'm guessing it's because I actually feel that you need to do your best to learn as much as you can and to develop your skills. So I am not, for example, I'm in a very technical engineering field, but I'm not an engineer, let's say. So it takes a lot for me to really go into the details of things, right? So I can't just fake it. I have, I don't like it because it really takes a lot of effort to understand something. In my career, I need to be able to understand what the customer's needs are, and I cannot just sort of figure it out or think that I figure it out. I have to be certain so that so that I can help them get what they want. So that's one. I don't know, maybe I just don't like the sound of it. The other one, I really don't like the sound of it, is don't be bossy. This one is more like towards gender, I think,
Yeah.
It feels like, if you're a girl, you're a woman, you can't be bossy. I don't know. It just makes me feel that that we are, always seeking to have approval of others instead of sort of stepping up and being a leader. So that kind of makes you feel like, it's okay to just sit there and seek approval instead of stepping up. And it has always bothered me when people say don't be bossy. I think it has sort of like a negative connotation when it comes to a woman being a leader. Yeah, I think those two are the ones that stand out for me.
Yeah, I think there's some really, really good golden nuggets in there. And I think this is one of the purpose we did this show, for people to have access to this information, these pieces of advice. I think the one that you mentioned that stands out for me as well is the stopping and taking a breath. I think that sounds like something so basic to people that might be listening to this, but actually having the ability to, especially in like the modern day, how stressed we all are with work, everything is so fast paced, everything's so ever changing. We have information instantaneously at our fingertips. We're constantly getting this information to our mind. We're constantly in front of a screen, whether it's our laptop or our phones. And I think actually being able to have the self-awareness and the conscientious mind to stop and decompress. And I think one thing you mentioned a second ago is what really helps me is just having a change of environment, like just going and working from somewhere different. It refreshes the brain. I think it demystifies the brain fog, and you just have a fresh perspective on things. I think that for me is something I still struggle with now, if I'm honest. I do really struggle to just stop and switch off. I'm trying my best to get better at it, especially when I'm with my daughters, just trying to just put the phone down and just not look at emails and just try to be a bit more present. It's easier said than done in the modern day, but it definitely takes some getting used to.
Yeah, for sure. And you know what it is also like, expectations of ourselves, not only imposed by others, but by ourselves, are really high these days. We want to be the best parent, the best, partner, the best employee, the best everything, right? The best friend, the best everything. And expectations are really, really high. And sometimes just by the pure fact that we are pressured to under these expectations, we get stressed very quickly, right? Besides everything else going on in our lives. So taking a breath definitely helps to sort of calm down a little bit on all of that.
No, absolutely. And the other thing I wanted to talk about is I guess a bit more of like a kind of like a tangible thing is resources. So again, this comes back to one of the sort of the main ethoses of this show, is to give people access to things that they just wouldn't have even thought about or didn't know existed. So in terms of over the years, again, the best sort of resources that you've identified over the years of your career that you've been able to really utilize, whether that could be anything, it could be courses, programs, mentors. What resource have you helped to identify has helped you most sort of kind of segue into the space sector?
I think for me, connections on the space industry is, it's crucial for what I do. I mean, everything I do is based on people, right? People making decisions, people understanding issues and problems. So definitely connections for sure. It's just my sort of my main resource. I think I learned a lot from people, a lot on my daily, let's say, daily routine. I learn a lot from people, listening to my teams and understanding them is huge. But I think so in terms of resources, I love to understand in my world. It's everything about understanding the needs of my customers. So I need to do a lot of homework in preparation. So I read a lot about the companies that I'm working with, their annual reports. I listen to some podcasts, for example, of people just like this podcast, understanding what others are doing, understanding the people, the people that I'm going to be dealing with. I also like to attend, courses in well-being. There's one program, for example, I just did for a Yale program for the science of well-being, which was fantastic. So I try to really get into understanding human emotions and just what the needs, not only on the company level, and being able to understand what the company needs to do what they are set to do, but also the people, like what is it that motivates people to do what they have to do, right? So I spent a lot of time understanding just human interactions and understanding the companies, their businesses. So it's not just about selling a service or selling a product, but actually getting to know what is behind all of it, right? What is it? What's the purpose of a company? What's the purpose? And you'll be surprised, but sometimes people don't even understand themselves. So it's also helping them get to that point where it's clear, and then they can focus and they have something to, sort of guide them through a decision-making process. So there's a lot of, I am constantly signing up for different programs, and I love to listen to podcasts. There's several on the space industry that are interesting, space economy on the orbit, etc. There are several podcasts that I like to listen on the space side, but just reading about, statistics and reading about new technologies coming in place. So what is it? And listening to people. I mean, honestly, listening to people is probably on top of everything. Their ideas, the way of working, etc.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I think on top of that, one of the questions we kind of like to close the show out with is what advice would you give somebody now that is it doesn't, regardless of what background they could be an engineer, they could be a software developer or business development or operations, HR, anything. If someone is on the outside now that wants to get into the space sector, doesn't have any previous space experience, what advice would you give to that person that's looking to enter into the space sector in 2022 and beyond?
Yeah. So if you are entering the industry and you don't have any experience before, I would say when making a decision, choose the one thing that gives you the most options in the future. So let's say you want to know about, I don't know, human transportation. This is what you are looking to get into. Understand the different sectors of human transportation and get to a position where you can go and maybe go in different areas within that idea, right? So I think that if you make a decision to always look into the options, sometimes we choose, a specific point, and it's hard to, after you spend years on that area, it's really hard to move from that area out, right? And I tell this to my team as well. Like, for example, if somebody is in it's a lawyer and they're curious about the technology, then you can choose all kinds of different sectors in the space law side that could get you to understand the technology, right? So it's not just concentrated on one particular point. So that's one thing. The other thing is, don't burn bridges. It's a small community. It's a small industry in terms of people, right? I mean, you will cross people in different times of your career, and if you burn bridges, that's not going to help in the future, because it is a small community. Your reputation, it's very, very important to be able to succeed in the industry. So I think those two. So open sort of your choices in terms of what you're planning to do. So if you're entering in an area, make sure that area gives you different choices later on, where you can go to different areas within the industry, and making sure that you maintain. At the end, it's all about people, and at the end, the relationships that you build within your careers are the ones that are always going to help you push up and improve your horizons and your ways of looking at things. So I think people taking care of those relationships is extremely important.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And like you say, you never know when you're going to cross paths with someone again. So yeah, absolutely spot on. Excellent. All right. Well, that concludes everything of our show. I just want to take the time to say thank you again. I know how extremely busy you are, so I really, really appreciate you taking the time and coming on our podcast today. It's been brilliant.
Sure, this was fun. Thank you so much for the invitation. Appreciate it.
No worries. Great to speak with you. Thanks, Stella. Take care.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.